Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, April 7th, 2017. And I'm coming to you from a farm in Missouri. Give you a little crop report, a little precipitation report at the end of the newscast. But I want to start with the war card. It has been flipped over with this chemical gas attack in Syria. And we went from wanting to knock out ISIS to now the U.S. is going to knock out Assad. Here's a quote from Donald Trump, the president. Trump on Syria's Assad, something should happen. Before we get there, people are claiming this is a false flag. In other words, this is a chemical attack that was caused by ISIS or the U.S. or somebody who wants the U.S. involved in more fighting. And this is people like Ron Paul, former presidential candidate and congressman, chemical weapons attack in Syria, likely a false flag. His son, Rand Paul, is urging the president not to get involved, but I think the die is cast. I think war is going to be at least limited war in the Middle East, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But here we have Trump to be briefed on full range of military options in Syria. That's Reuters. Here's Zero Hedge. Trump weighs saturation strike in Syria, resulting in Russian military deaths. Glad you brought that up, because Russia has a naval base in Tartus. And I said when I first started on USA Watchdog in 2009, I said there is no way Russia is going to turn that over to ISIS or turn that over to the U.S. or anybody else. Their military, their naval base in Tartus, which is rigged to take nuclear submarines and all kinds of other stuff. They spent billions of dollars on that base. Now the Russians have an Air Force base in Syria. And, they're talking about, a saturation strike that may lead to the deaths of Russians, or a no-fly zone, and you're going to stop Russian fighters from flying over Syria. Russia was invited in to Syria by the duly elected President Assad. He may be a creep and a terrible person, but the U.S. basically is invading. And again, we were going to go there to stop ISIS, and now, whoop, we're going to knock out Assad. Well, guess who else wants Assad knocked out? That'd be ISIS. So this is a dangerous thing, folks. We get into a nasty war in the Middle East, and you can expect the markets to tank. I mean tank and tank hard, because they are propped up. The Federal Reserve, Paul Craig Roberts brought up the fact, which is a great fact. Why does the Federal Reserve have a trading desk? To manipulate everything. And if it was so good, the economy so good, then it wouldn't need to be manipulated. If stocks and bonds were such buys, you wouldn't have to manipulate them. And if gold and silver were such terrible buys, you wouldn't have to, push them down and suppress the prices of gold and silver. It's just unbelievable. It's really quite unbelievable. If you take a look at the next thing that we have with the Susan Rice story, and here we have the play on words, because the nuclear option's been tripped in the Senate. Forget Russiagate, Rice scandal, constitutional crisis. This is after it's been revealed that Susan Rice, unmasked name, she says it wasn't political and she didn't give any information or intel to anybody. She didn't leak anything to anyone. But then you have this Evelyn Farkas, who's the Assistant Secretary of Defense. She basically reveals that they were spying on Trump. A team had leaked intel. This is Evelyn Farkas, and then she's also Evelyn Farkas, who is a deputy, a Assistant Secretary of Defense. It was 2 weeks before the election, saying, well, don't worry, if Donald Trump gets elected, he'll be taken out of office pretty quickly after the election. And I'm not even joking. That's basically her quote. I mean, you're talking about a grand plot to remove Donald Trump from office. And the duly elected president from office, whether you like him or not. And I think what's gone on, what clearly has unfolded, is that they went after this sham of a Russian story, the collusion of the Russian story. And there's no there, and they have to hold on to it, because nobody ever asked this question when they got around and said, hey, how are we going to take this guy out? I mean, this guy's going after sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, and those are our voters. The illegal aliens and the illegal voting, mainly the illegal aliens and many other illegal election fraud and voting fraud that the Democrats use. He's going after that. And that's why their sanctuary cities, those are their voters. The voters, they say there's no evidence of them voting. Sanctuary states, California now, that's how they stay in power. Those are their voters. This is absolutely outrageous. And that's why they want to take Trump out, because that he's going to attack their power base. But, this is a constitutional crisis, an unbelievable constitutional crisis. I've told you before, this makes Watergate look like a squirt gun fight. It's nothing. It's like stealing a piece of, a 2-cent piece of gum compared to the crisis that you have with an outgoing president and his administration surveilling an incoming president and his administration to try to thwart them and embarrass them and derail them and impeach them and try to jail them. That's why, Maxine Waters is like, he's going to get impeached, because the high circles, the power circles on the Democratic side, that's what they were going to try. They were going to try to knock him out of the box, take him out early, and it didn't happen. And nobody ever in this plan sat around when they had this conversation and said, hey, what happens if it doesn't work? Oh, no, don't worry about it. It'll work. We're going to take him out. He's an imbecile. We're going to get something dirty on him. And they didn't. And here's what happens when it doesn't work. They do investigations. They make charges. They put people in prison. I mean, this is absolutely unreal, unprecedented in American history. It's absolutely unprecedented. And then you have CNN, my old employer. CNN rages against Susan Rice bombshell, urges viewers to ignore the story. They're just going to ignore it. They're just saying it's just a diversion, or, with the Russian scandal, which they had produced nothing in months of investigation. Nothing. Zero. Nunca. Nada. No collusion. Nothing. That's why I think they used this whole scam of a Russian investigation as a pretense for, well, we need to surveil the Trump administration because they're colluding with the Russians. And they haven't produced anything. And I don't think they will produce anything. But what this is producing is a constitutional crisis where people are going to go to jail. Next up, the Federal Reserve. And with all this, war talk, wars, rumors of wars, and oh, by the way, North Korea just fired another missile into the Sea of Japan, as if, Trump and Tillerson don't have enough on their plate. But I digress. That's not the big story. Is a story that basically has been covered over with the Susan Rice revelations and the Russian collusion story, and Nunez temporarily stepping down, and also the chemical attack in Syria and military action likely going to happen in Syria. Then we have the Federal Reserve comes out and says we're going to shrink our balance sheet. So Gregory Mannarino calls me of TradersChoice.net and says, dude, you know what this means? Hit me. He says this means they pumped it, and now they're going to dump it. He says they're public enemy number one. This worthless crap they had on their balance sheet for so long is now worth something, and now they're going to shrink their balance sheet. That's what the Fed announced. They're going to shrink their balance sheet while they still can. They're going to dump it out on the market. Mannarino says, this is going to raise interest rates on the long end of the curve. You mean like mortgages? Yep. And so he says, I'm telling you, this is a sure sign that the housing market has completely topped, and the Fed's coming out now and saying they're going to shrink their balance sheet of all these mortgage-backed securities. Let me make that. They bought all this junk from all these banks that was way underwater. Now they're going to sell this stuff, these mortgage-backed securities that are now actually worth something now at the moment, before they fall off a cliff again. That's what's going on with that. He says, be careful that this is certainly a top in the housing market, and interest rates for mortgages are definitely going up. One of the other things I want to get is the nuclear option that I brought up with the Susan Rice thing. With the nuclear option in the Senate is to get Gorsuch in as the next Supreme Court justice, and of course he's going to follow the Constitution. That is kryptonite for Democrats. These sanctuary cities, and Trump's not allowed to do, immigration policy, and they have these judges in Hawaii going to stop the president of the United States. Totally settled law, constitutional, settled law, multiple cases. I told you about the Elian Gonzalez case that, the Clinton administration lost every court case except they just said, hey, listen, the president has the right to do immigration. Elian Gonzalez, back to Cuba. Remember that? And that is settled law. It is so settled law. Well, Gorsuch is going to follow the Constitution. And that's going to be a 5-4 court. And when Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I don't wish anything bad on her, but when she leaves the court, she's 83 or 84. When she leaves, and I think she's going to be next, they're going to have a 6-3 court. And that's one of the things I said. Whether you like Trump or not, when it comes to the Supreme Court, he will basically save America's Constitution. The Democrats hate the Constitution. And Hillary would have put a bunch of people, a bunch of Marxists in that hate the Constitution, would have said, oh, yeah, fine. Yeah, everything's fine. We hate the First Amendment, the Second, but we hate the Constitution. We hate all of it. You guys don't have any rights. You do what we say to do when we say to do it. That was going to happen. So Gorsuch is in the Supreme Court, and I suspect before it's over, before the first Trump administration, the first Trump term is done, and there'll be a 6-3 court. For 6, meaning 6 will support the Constitution, which will defend the rights of all of Americans. I want to show you, and I'm happy about this. It's actually some good news. Here's the drought map. And remember, California over here, it was horrible. There's hardly any red in the state of California. Of course, it's Waterworld. Kevin Costner is going to do his sequel to Waterworld in California, and they have a lot of other problems. But basically, there's no drought. There's a minor drought working in Missouri and in the Midwest and some down here in the Southeast. But there's been a lot of rain. And a drought is not, at least for the foreseeable future, going to be a problem. What is going to be a problem here in Missouri and other parts in the Midwest where they grow things, and that is too much water. You can plant seeds, and then you can get too much water, and they can rot in the ground. And, a couple of years ago, the wheat crop, the winter wheat crop, which looks beautiful right now, but, as it grows and gets bigger and taller, and then it turns, golden, and then, if they can't get in there, take it out, and they keep getting water. What happened to the wheat crop a couple of years ago is that it resprouted, on the stalk, which made it just about worthless. People got creamed doing it. But right now, California looks good. Most of the United States look good. The food growing regions of the United States pretty much are getting water. Things are looking pretty good. Listen, that's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter, and I wanted to give you one last thing. Cliff High from halfpasthuman.com. He talks about the dollar. He talks about, basically the tribes fighting each other, the deep state, against the Trump administration, the deep state against the deep state, the Democrats versus the Republicans. Unbelievable stuff. Talks about gold. He talks about silver. He talks about the governments crashing. You got to watch the early Sunday release with Cliff High from halfpasthuman.com. That's the way I see it. I want to thank you all for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and your donations. That helps us out. And remember this, fear not. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, and above all, spiritually. Fear not. God the Father is firmly in charge.